Pots and containers form such an essential part of our garden element. And what it adds that bling. It adds that focus, that drama, a little bit of character, sometimes a bit too much. But what it also does, it gives us balance. And one of the best uses of containers that I see in gardens used from South Africa to Pofadder to the United Kingdom is when pots are used on either side to welcome you into an area. Whether they're welcoming you into a new section of the garden, to the front of your home, to the sides of beautiful entrance gates, they just seem to work. And that is probably the most commonly used form. But where's the but? Where does it start going wrong? Always consider your scale. If you've got a double-story home, you need to put a fairly large size pot next to it, like here, on a base up to my shoulder. You can't go putting a little Alibaba pot like this, which, believe it or not, I have seen. That then you've just got scales of wall in front of you. So always remember scale and proportion. And a tip that I always tell people when they're on their way to go and buy pots is take a tape measure. Silly as it might sound, but very often you get to the place of where you're going to be purchasing your desired pots and you think it's going to work. By the time you've loaded in the boot, got it home, unpacked it, dragged it to its spot, it doesn't work. So get your proportions correct, which is really important. Pots as well can offer us so much else by grouping them together to create some character or just an accent, balancing on either side of a bench, but it doesn't need to be formal. That gives you such a beautiful array of height, texture, and just some interest within a spot of the garden. The one great thing about pots and containers is that no matter how big or small your garden is, there's a place for them. Whether it's 3 little terracotta pots that have your favorite succulent in it, or 3 beautiful geraniums, there is somewhere that you can put a pot. And there's always somewhere that you can put another one. And that's the beauty. So to try and keep it as neutral as possible and not so glaring on the eye that your eye's jumping all over, we've used the similar plants. So in this case, we've used the agaves, and we've used some of my more special succulents sitting in the foreground. But you'll notice the one thing, that the pot, there are only 2 different finishes in these pots, in this entire collection of about 15 pots. They're either terracotta or they're concrete. So we haven't mixed anything more than that. As soon as we put another texture in here, whether it be a fiber cement pot or it's finished with a different coloring or a different texture, as soon as we start throwing that in here, ooh boy, licorice all sort, and your eye's just not going to be settled. So always keep that in the back of your mind when choosing and selecting how you're going to be grouping your pots in and around your home. And of course, pots are only limited by your imagination. Whether you're planting in a hypertufa pot that you've made yourself, whether it's an old galvanized bucket that you found, whether it's an old boot or a shoe, or even a coffee haste tin that you are recycling, it's up to you guys. The sky is the limit. There are so many things that you can use. And in fact, that's where a lot of the fun comes in. If you're looking to create magic in dappled shade or a deeply shaded area, then ferns and plants like bromeliads should be first on your list. We all have a favorite spot in our gardens, and undoubtedly this is mine. It was one of those sections of the garden that I actually didn't know what to do because it was kind of behind some trees. It was a bit neglected, and I then fell in love with ferns and bromeliads and houseplants that had kind of overgrown and overstayed their welcome indoors, needed a space to go. So what better way to deal with them than to put them under this awesome shade? They love it, because remember, most houseplants actually come from jungles where it's very deep shade and they're large-leafed, normally quite attractive because they don't have a flower, so they have attractive leaves because that's the way that they attract their pollinators. And believe it or not, in a garden like this, where it's mainly foliage and textures, you can still get as gorgeous an effect as a garden full of flowers. So once you've got your main plants established, which I kind of just happened to stumble across, we've added in some tree ferns, some beautiful leafy dracaenas. It then starts creating its own personality and its own environment, and that is when we start to play. There was a tree here. You can see the trunk, there it is. It had fallen over, so instead of dragging it out, we just left it here. And the bromeliads that had once been an indoor houseplant finished flowering. We then took it and attached it to this log, and all you need there is a bit of coir and some leftover stockings, of course, which we all have. Anyway, put them onto there, they start making their babies and getting their own environment. As the leaves fall from the trees, so look right here in this bromeliad, they actually start feeding it like it normally works in nature. And that's what we're trying to do here. You can see this guy has grown right up here. It's starting to rot away. As the log starts breaking up and falling down, we don't rip it away, and we leave it, because as it falls, look here, and I pick this up. Underneath here is beautiful leaf mulch. This keeps the moisture in, and it starts creating its own environment and making its own compost. And that is perfect for all these plants, much like we would find if we're walking on a jungle floor. What it also does allow us to do is to play with colours and texture. And this fern over here is bought as an indoor fern. It's called Phlebodium, terrible name, but never mind that. It has got gorgeous foliage. Goes more green as an adult, but look at its new foliage. Look at this beautiful grey. It's almost opaque, and such textures, as you put that against the variegation, it works so beautifully. And that's where you get to play. Remember, if you're mulching this well, you don't have to water that often. But you can put plants in here which then can adapt to their own environment and really create their own life cycle right here.